Welcome to the Expressions of Destiny podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer, and welcome to part 3 of our burnout series. We have been really diving in deep on this subject of burnout, and it's so important. I see this every single day. I've seen it for years in so many people's lives, and it is so important to pay attention to, but sadly it is one of the things that gets swept under the rug a lot of times. The majority of the time, really. And so we're just going to dive in deep here. In this third episode, we're going to be shifting gears to talk about the employee's perspective. This is very important. You know, we took part 1 and we kind of broke down what burnout is. And then in part 2, we focused on leadership. And it wasn't, a moment to jump all over leadership and to say that they're wrong and things need to be changed, but it's just really learning how to look at both sides. So as we've already talked about, there's these moments where, leadership wants to blame the employees and employees want to blame leadership, and it really falls on both parts. So it's very important that we understand what is actually happening on both sides of the fence. There really shouldn't be a fence, and that's where the problem arises, is that there's no relationship and communication, as we've talked about before. And so we're going to look at the employee's perspective on this episode, and we're going to pull all of that together towards the end here. But I'm also going to share with you my story about the physical and emotional toll that overwork created in my life, what it creates and how, what it does to create this physical and emotional toll in other people's lives. So there's so many stories that are among us, and we just need to learn to listen and to watch for the signs in other people's lives so that we can begin to recognize them in our own life. So just as I did in the first 2 parts, I want to kind of break down what burnout is again for those of you that haven't been able to listen to the first parts, just so we can have a better understanding. First of all, we're going to talk about the physical and the emotional toll that burnout has on employees and leaders. So we're not going to forget about the leaders here. Leaders get burnt out too. It's not just an employee problem. It happens in leadership. And that's a lot of the reason that this burnout trickles down to the rest of the body, if you will, if that's the best way for me to describe it right now. You have the head, you have the body, you have the leader, you have the workers, you have the help, you have those employees that are there to help you be successful and to grow. And so, if there's an illness or a sickness of the head, it's going to come down and fall upon the shoulders of the body and every other part and every position. You get what I'm saying here. So let's go ahead and jump in here. So the physical and emotional toll we talked earlier was insomnia, things like chronic fatigue, feelings of hopelessness. You're constantly tired. You just can't seem to focus on anything. And so there's a lot that falls into that physical and emotional part. But then there's this simple feeling of just feeling like you're trapped. That there's really nothing that you can do about it. And when you get into this position where you feel like you're trapped, there's this silence that happens because you're afraid of being judged, or you're afraid of losing your job. I mean, there are a lot of people that stay in a position, and they stay in that position frustrated and overwhelmed and upset, and they stick with it because that's their job security, and they don't know how to fix it, so they just deal with it, and that is a very dangerous place to be. So let me go ahead and share with you my story, and let's hope this doesn't go too long, because this was a full year of gradual burnout that I experienced several years back. I've talked a lot on this podcast about the different positions and different industries that I've worked in, and I've held so many different jobs, and they all kind of fall in the same places where, I could still fulfill purpose. I was still in a position to help people, to lead people, to love on people and encourage others, and kind of be that light. I mean, I really, really wanted to shine. I wanted to be that bright light that brought this joy into the workplaces. And so it was very easy for me to adapt, and it still is, to adapt to whatever position and place that I'm at. I'm going to be the one that is trying to joke with people and trying to make you laugh and, treating you to things and offering food and drinks and coffee and whatever it is, whatever I have on me that I can give, I'm going to give, because I want to just help make your day better. And so this is how I've always carried myself. It's just who I am. And so I, at one point, was working at a big chain grocery store, and I had worked retail before, but never in a grocery store. It was usually clothing, the malls and the outlet stores when we were in Vegas at one point. And, they have the big outlet malls at the ends of the strips. And so I was used to that type of work. But when it came to this grocery store, I was really just looking for something part-time. I needed something for just a very short period, a very small season. My husband was transitioning jobs, and so it was just my way of saying, hey, let me, help out while we're in this transition. And so I went looking for a part-time job. I looked at a position of stocking, something easy. I love to work. I want to be moving around all the time. And I was offered a different position to be a personal shopper. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm still going to be, walking around the store and helping the customers and shopping for those that are shopping online. And so, okay, I can do this. This is something new. I'm up for the challenge. And so I was told that I was going to be given a random schedule. And if you know me and you've kind of gotten to know me, I am the type of person that is very direct and very bold. I don't mind asking for something because the answer is going to either be yes or no. There's no harm in asking for it, and if I don't ask, then I'll never know what that answer is. And so I remember going to my manager and to HR and saying, I'll take the position. I really want to do this. I really want to be here, but I'm going to need a more steady schedule, Monday through Friday, preferably the earliest that you have, which was the 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift. And my reasoning was because my daughters were being homeschooled. And so that would give me an opportunity. They were in middle school at the time. I think entering high school. And that was going to give me an opportunity, to allow them to get their work done during the day and still be home early enough to check their work and to kind of, help them out with things that they needed some extra guidance on. And then still have time to make dinner and be prepared for when my husband came home and us to be able to have family time. And then I would start all over again at 5 a.m. the next morning. And that was okay for me. I'm a morning person. I'd rather get up and knock my work out and come home and have that time. And so I remember asking for this and them kind of hesitating, because at this grocery store, everybody's just supposed to take whatever shift that you get. And I had been told, they're probably not going to honor your request. But it was maybe 2 weeks of a very sporadic schedule. I'm talking about, going in early one day and getting done, and then the next day having a late night shift, and then having to get up the next morning and have another early morning after I had just gotten home late the night before, and then on another day, being right smack in the middle of the day. And so it was all over the place. But after about 2 weeks, I was handed that schedule, and I was able to be during the time that I was there, to be there for that 5 a.m. to that 2 p.m. And I loved it. Get in there and get out. Now, this was also going on when COVID had started to pick up, and part-time very quickly became full-time. Not what I had signed up for. Full-time immediately became overtime. And we were there so many hours. Now, it was a blessing. Extra hours, extra pay. It was, that part of it was great. But I will tell you, the full-time and the overtime was not the burnout problem for me. That was not the moment that I could say I got burnt out because I was working so much and I was physically exhausted and, I just didn't want to be there anymore. That was not my burnout moment. Most people, that probably would have been the point where exhaustion would set in. But I was motivated and I was ready to work and I was willing to help and I wasn't afraid, that when everybody else was running around afraid of getting sick and whatever else, I was okay with it. I was willing to be there. And so it wasn't hard for me. The burnout came when, as I was working these 5 a.m. to 2 shifts, and all of a sudden nobody else was showing up. People would call out every day. Multiple coworkers would call out every day. There were people that would just quit, right in the moment. And here I was standing in the back room trying to prep these orders, trying to prepare the day, trying to write on the board all the orders that had come in, trying to set up the bays, getting ready to start shopping, and no one was showing up. And so I was covering this back room by myself. Not all the time, but a lot of the times. And to have to search through the store to find someone to help me shop those groceries so that I could prep them in the back and be ready for when the customers arrived to pick up. That was 2 hours in the morning from 5 to 7 trying to figure out what I was going to do. My manager was nowhere to be found because they didn't come in at those early hours. They came in at a normal time. And so a lot of times it was the other managers in the store that were having to step in and shop for me. A couple of managers from a couple of departments would come over, or they would send over their next best person. And, I would stand there thanking God that I had somebody to get these groceries picked. Otherwise, I was going to be doing all of it by myself. And then about 7:30, that next shift, 7:30, 8 o'clock, other people started to show up and I had my help and everything was great. You add on to that the stress of trying to make sure things were set up right. Add on the stress of the physical exhaustion, lifting the totes and lifting the cases of water and packing the groceries and putting them from one cart onto another rolling cart in the bay, and then having to pull that load of groceries out into the parking lot to load the groceries. So now you're unloading and reloading, and for a while I was like, well, I'm getting my exercise. Everything is great. But when you are physically and mentally exhausted, then everything else starts to fall apart. I'm sorry, let me say mentally and emotionally exhausted. The physical toll starts to set in. So you're mentally and emotionally stressed and exhausted. Your body will begin to break down. Doesn't matter how strong you are. You could be one of the strongest people back there. It does not matter. Those other two will cause your body to begin to break down. And so day after day, I started to see that happen. I really began to feel it in my body. Now, just to give you a little background, I loved walking. I would walk every day. I would walk home from work sometimes. My husband would drive me up there in the mornings early, but I'd walk home, or I'd take my bike and ride my bike home. I loved being out there, on the roads, just walking and jogging and bike riding. And so, for me to begin to feel like my body was breaking down, that wasn't normal, because I was so used to that. I was used to the movement. My body craved that. It loved that. But this was a different kind of tiredness. It was absolutely different. And so, after time passed, and then I began to experience, Didn't matter how many times I had to work that back room by myself. Didn't matter how much I had to do on my own. Even when the people would come and they would help and everything. Then to have management that was telling me that I could do things a certain way when I would ask for permission to do it that way for certain reasons. And then when our corporate people were in the building, would turn around and throw me under the bus. And I learned very quickly to just stand up to them respectfully in private and let them know that I didn't agree with that, and I didn't understand why they would do something like that when we've discussed everything. You know, why didn't they back me up when every time people came in to, overlook what we were doing and to make sure that we were doing things according to the company standards, that I always made sure that things were in tip-top shape, clean, organized, in perfect order. But I was maybe doing a different system for the day because for certain circumstances that were known. And yet I was still thrown out there as, Jen just does whatever she wants to do. So I remember the day I had to stand up to my manager and tell them that I didn't appreciate that and that I didn't understand why they would do something like that when they had given me permission to implement the very system that I was using. They kind of looked at me shocked, like, I can't believe you just stood up to me, but they apologized. And I later heard them go to this corporate person and explain to them that this was not an all-the-time thing. It was a very rare occasion, when we needed to make sure that things were prepped on certain days. And so I appreciated that. I did. But it still felt like they didn't care. I had to stand up to that person to have something change. And then not too long after that, that person left. They were out. They were gone. And, it's really hard when you're trying, as an employee, you're trying to work under management and you find out that they were just as burned out as you were beginning to feel. And when they had an opportunity, they were gone. And we were left without a manager, waiting for someone to come in, waiting for some type of leadership, waiting for some type of head that was going to lead us on a daily. And when that person did come, they weren't there in the mornings. They didn't show up. They actually showed up really late a lot of times. I could never reach them when we needed help because other people had called out. I couldn't reach anybody. And I would have to go once again to the leadership of the other departments to find help. And so in this moment, I began to really fall apart. And when I say that, I mean, I would go to work and I was smiling. I was trying to do everything I could. The joy that I got in that job was daily fulfilling my purpose in serving the customers. When a customer would approach me, didn't matter how frustrated, upset, stressed I was, a customer would approach me on the floor and ask for help, and I would take a moment, actually many moments, to the point where, I'd get questioned about that sometimes, but that's a whole other story. But I would actually take the time to help the customer with whatever it is that they needed. They always made a point to say thank you. Thank you for taking the time for me, because usually I can't even find anybody. Or normally nobody ever really wants to help. Everybody's always in a hurry. And that was part of fulfilling my purpose that gave me joy and made me feel fulfilled when I walked out of that place, knowing that even if I was able to just help one person, I walked in my purpose for the day. So you have a job, you have a position, you have directions, but you also have purpose. And the two of them may not seem like they align all the time, but as long as you continue to operate in your purpose and you find the things that bring you joy in what you're doing, then they will come together. It doesn't mean that you have to learn to love that position and you have to prepare yourself to live in that position for the rest of your life. It just means you're finding that joy that you need in that moment, in that season, to be able to walk out what and who God has created you to do and to be. And that's what kept me going. That's what brought that strength back into my life. And again, every day I would go back into that place, into that store, and I would be miserable until I would approach or have a customer approach me and purpose was fulfilled. And then I'd come home, I'd be exhausted. I would cry myself to sleep sometimes because I didn't want to get up and go back the next morning. I dreaded it so badly. But then I would go in, clenching my teeth, just frustrated again, and here came purpose. Here came another customer. Here came a coworker that I was able to help. Here came somebody who needed something. And there I went, fulfilling purpose. Again, went home, stressed out, smiling at work, smiling for my family, crying myself to sleep. My husband encouraging me, telling me it's okay, you're doing a great job. But I'd go back into work and I wasn't getting the same thing. And so this burnout really, really began to set in. Now I'll tell you when I knew burnout was real. And it seems kind of funny because you wouldn't think of something like this as a symptom. But when we talk about our physical, our bodies breaking down, I remember the day that I was sitting at my counter in my kitchen, and I reached for my foot, and the outside of my foot, where your pinky toe, those first 3 toes on the outside, where I grabbed down to reach for them and to scratch, and they were numb. And as I began to fill up the rest of my foot, half of my foot was numb, a whole half of the foot. And it was something that I had never experienced before, ever. We might fall asleep on our arm the wrong way, or we might sit on our foot for too long, and you feel that tingling, that numbness, and it's like it's fallen asleep, and then it comes, and then it wakes up, as you start to move it. Those muscles start to operate, a little bit of pain here and there, but the foot was just numb. I had not been sitting on it. I hadn't been leaning on it, nothing. And so I began to tell my husband, and I was trying to figure out what is going on, Googling. We try to Google the symptoms. We try to figure out the problem. We want to be the doctor. And so as I tried to figure that out, just nothing was coming to me. And so it lingered and it lasted. And I was going to work like this, continuing to walk on that foot, trying to step correctly to make sure that I wasn't going to lose my balance, lifting these heavy crates every day, lifting these. Now remember, this was during COVID, so lifting all of those cases of water. I mean, people buying 5 to 10 cases at a time of water. Everybody wanted water, and twisting and turning, and couldn't figure out, what it was. To the point where, finally we said, let's just go to the ER. Let's go figure out what's going on. And so we arrived at the ER. I'm telling, the receiving nurse or the reception, I have no idea. Half of my foot is numb. I don't know what it is. They ran their tests. They did everything. You're healthy as I don't know what. All of your levels are great. Blood pressure's good. Your heart is good. They did everything. There was nothing else wrong except that my foot was numb. And so at some point they said, well, we're going to send you to have a test done. We're going to test your nerves and everything else in your leg. And so they scheduled out for that. I went and had that done, and sure enough, it was a pinched nerve from all of the movement, all of the lifting, all of the turning, all these other things. Again, I had never experienced anything like this in my life, and it seems so menial, right? It's not a big deal, but it was, because you just don't know what's happening when your body starts to break down. So after that, I was told, well, you do have a pinched nerve. We're going to have to send you to physical therapy. And I'm thinking, okay, I can do that. Well, here's the problem. When I called for someone to schedule that physical therapy, they said they'd get back with me, and I waited and waited and waited, and nobody ever called me. I followed up. They told me that they were still working on it, and then nobody ever called me. I remember one day sitting down with my husband, and we were talking about things, and I just broke down, and I started crying, and I said, I'm just so tired. I'm exhausted. I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know what's happening. Give you a little bit of background. I don't ever go to the doctor. I don't have a reason to go to a doctor. That's why the ER was such a big deal, because, we just don't go to the doctor unless there's a problem, and there's never really a problem. And so I knew I was just completely exhausted. I was burned out. First time that had ever happened. I'd been under stress many times in different positions, and I knew how to manage it well. But I had also been in positions where people cared, where people were willing to reach out and to help. And in this particular situation, nobody cared. And I'm going to take that back just one step, because there was one person, one manager, not in my department. It was a store manager that would walk around every morning and ask and say good morning to every single person and ask every person how they were doing. And if you even looked at them sideways, they'd stop and say, okay, how are you really doing? And they would make time for you. But it was sad that it was only one person in that entire environment. And so back to my breakdown. I cried and cried. And I remember the moment that my husband told me, Jen, you can be done. It's time. You can walk away. That brought so much joy to my life, to feel like I had the support of my husband saying, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. Because we have to love where we're at. We have to understand that there is something even greater. But if we don't feel like we belong, then that's not the place where you're supposed to be. And I'm going to speak that over and over to you, because we allow ourselves to get trapped in these positions thinking that there's no other way out and there's no other opportunity. But there is. We don't have to sacrifice all these things and allow ourselves to burn out because we are staying in the game for everybody else and for something else, or because of fear that we're not going to be able to find something else. And so when we sat there across the table from each other, and he told me those words, he spoke those words to me, I felt a release, a relief, a refreshing. And I was able to walk away from that job. I walked into my HR office with my letter of resignation, and I handed it to her, and I said, this is my letter of resignation. I've dated it for such and such date, which is exactly 1 month from today. But I ask that you do not tell anybody. Don't tell my manager. Don't tell anybody in the store, anybody that I work with. I will let my manager know a week before my last day. And if I hear it from anybody else in this store, I know where it came from, because you're the only person I told. Why? Because I wanted to walk out of there in peace. I wanted to be able to walk away without people saying, what's wrong? What happened? Are you okay? Did somebody do something to you? It was not necessary. It was none of their business. And it was none of that. I was walking away simply for me and for my family and for my health. And I didn't have to involve anybody else in that. But to be able to just walk away happy with no drama and know that I served my purpose, I served my time, and it was time for me to move on. Now, still dealing with a foot that was half numb, I walked away from there a month later, And I never looked back. I never got a call from physical therapy. But what I did do, as I said, you know what? Physical therapy is not going to help me. I'm going to do my own. And that next day I got up and I started walking again. And I walked every day, at least a mile. I started with a mile. I went on to 2 miles, 3 miles. And then some days I was always walking between 3 and 5 miles in my neighborhood. That was my peace. That was my place of joy. That was my time with God. Just listening to my worship music. As I got better, I began to jog. I would listen to my praise music. But that was my time with Him. And that was the time of healing that I needed. And in about 3 months of walking and doing physical therapy on my own, that was my physical therapy. I'm not talking about doing, the exercises and stuff that they tell you to do in physical therapy. My therapy was just walking. The numbness in my foot went away. That nerve was no longer pinched. And I was at peace. And that was a huge eye-opener for me, because I had to learn to take time for myself and take time for my healing, to take time to rest. Not that I couldn't work a job. Not that I hated going to a physical job. I loved it. I love working. I love working hard. I would rather be out in a field, in a warehouse, outside gardening, carrying heavy bags of soil. This is what I do at home. I would rather be doing this labor than to be sitting at a desk all day. So I love to work. That was not the problem. It was that there were certain things that were not edifying my spirit and my soul and my purpose. There were people who didn't care about their people. Not just me, but there was leadership that did not care about any of the people that were under them. And a lot of times only cared about themselves. And I never saw it as it's the leader's problem. I always looked at the leaders, looking at them more like, I wonder what happened to them. I wonder if nobody was ever there to encourage them. I wonder if they never had a great leader to teach them, to show them, to speak into their life, to encourage them, to build them up, to tell them how great they are, to keep pushing them to do better, to teach them how to be a great leader. I never put the blame on the leadership. I always wondered what happened or what didn't happen in their life, in their position, in their career. What disappointments are there? What could I do to help them? And a lot of times they didn't want to listen to anybody that was below them in position, meaning not in experience, but position. And that's tough, because sometimes we do just want to be there for each other. We do just want to encourage each other. And a lot of times we're not allowed to, because only certain people are allowed to speak to you and share with you. Why? Because we're human and we get offended. So that's my story. This is where I've learned compassion. This is where I've learned leadership. I've learned how to love on others. I've learned how to just encourage others. And this is what we need to do, because we never know what other people are going through. We just don't, unless we do take the time to watch, to listen, to learn. So I want to jump into some of these other points here before we get too long. This is probably going to be one of our longest episodes for this series, but it's very important for us to cover these things so that we have a better understanding. That story that I shared with you is just one of several stories, of my own personal stories. But there's so many other people out there that are suffering, that are struggling just the same. And they're doing it in silence. They're doing it in secret. And we don't know. And they think nobody cares. But we just don't know because we don't take the time to know. So we're going to jump into, again, the employee's perspective, okay? So take all of this and just evaluate for yourself. I want to touch on this first point about certain things that your boss should never say to you. Now, these are important to recognize, to catch on to and recognize when you do hear them, because this is where some of that burnout will start. And this is where you actually learn more about your leader and what it is that they may be going through. Maybe something that they're experiencing. You may not have the details, but you just know that something has happened there. And it's a perfect opportunity for us to step up and be compassionate about it as well. You know, even though it may hurt us, even though it may put us in a position of feeling overwhelmed and burned out, what can we do to help the other side too? So some of the things that your boss should never say to you, something like, you should be grateful that you even have this job. Okay. That's one of those things that will make you feel trapped. Like, well, I guess there's no other option for me, so I'm just stuck. How about just figure it out? You go to them for help. You're asking them, and their response is, well, just figure it out. I know you can do it. Just figure it out. This next one falls in line with that one. I don't have time for this. Same thing. You go to your management, your leadership, you know, even another coworker that's supposed to be helping you, and you hear, well, I don't have time for this. Can you just do it? Can you figure it out? Let's see. That's not my problem. That's a big one. Well, yes, it is. As a team, it's everyone's problem. We work together to solve this. It's not that it's your personal problem, but it's something that you need to take action on, that you need to be willing to try to figure out. Another one is, we've always done it this way. That's someone that is just stuck in their ways and they're not going to change. They don't want to hear your suggestions, and so there's no open door. And this is a huge red flag, because when you hear that, we've always done it this way, then they're not willing to be receptive to any other type of new idea, or even considering anything, or even just allowing their employees to share their creative ideas and thoughts on certain things. If you're not willing to listen to those things, you're not willing to receive or accept anything, unless it's your idea. Okay, we went over, you should be grateful you have this job. You're lucky to have a job in this time right now. A lot of people will take that and think, well, yeah, you know what? I am lucky to have this job. I guess I just need to be grateful. Yes, we need to always be grateful, but we don't have to settle either. Why can't you be more like so-and-so? Now, this sounds more like something that would come out of, maybe a parent's mouth or something. And so at that point, when I hear things like this, I think, well, okay, you're not mom and dad. You're not, we're not going to do this comparison game. You know, I'm not like them. So that's just that. And one of the other really big ones that just came to my mind was, it's not my fault. And this again is that throwing someone else under the bus and not caring about taking that responsibility for all of y'all as a team, to not just cover you, but to be in agreement with you, to show that you are a team and you're willing to stand up to all of this together and work it out. So these are just some of the things that we may hear leadership, or a boss or a supervisor, business owner speak to their employees. When you hear these particular statements, it's time to really perk up and start to evaluate what's going on here, like what's happening. Now, after covering all those things, I want to move to something different here. Just like with everything else in life, there are stages to burnout as well. And I want to break these down for you, because this will really help you to be able to recognize exactly where you fall, where you're at, what level you're at of this burnout. It's we look at the symptoms of things and we determine, do I have a cold? Do I have the flu? Do I have pneumonia? We're always trying to read up and gauge, what am I feeling? Okay, yes, that's me. Yes, my eyes are watery. My nose is running. My chest is hurting. My stomach is sick. We try to figure these things out. Well, there are stages to burnout, and there are certain things that you will experience and that you begin to go through that will help you to determine where you are at in this burnout place. And so the first stage to burnout is the honeymoon phase. Now, we hear this with a lot of things, right? It's that beginning point. The initial stage it's usually characterized by you have like this high energy, you're enthusiastic, you're optimistic, and then you just get so excited about this new job and this new project. It's like being in love for the first time. You are just gushing over with everything inside of you because you're in this new place and it's exciting. Now, all of that is great, but then you begin to set into that next stage. Stage 2 is the onset of stress. Okay, so now we've been in this job, we're working it, we're learning things, we're figuring out stuff, we're having to do something new maybe that we've never done before. Well, as that honeymoon phase starts to fade, you begin to experience this stress. Like stress starts to just really come out. This might lead to those physical things. You start to feel tired. You start to get irritable. What is something else? This is where you start to find difficulty in focusing on things. You're really trying hard, but you just are starting to fall off that ladder, if that makes sense. You're feeling these little moments of, oh my gosh, I just don't want to do this right now. I'm tired. I don't want to go to work. And so that stress starts to set in. Now, here's where we can really miss those clues. Because if you think about it, at stage 2, that stress, everybody deals with some type of stress on a daily basis. We stress about, our job. We stress about family. We might stress over our kids. We might stress about what we're going to eat for dinner. There's so many levels of stress. And so it seems very insignificant. Okay, well, that was stressful, or I had a stressful day today. It's so insignificant, right? But this is the part where it can begin to get dangerous, because if we don't learn how to deal with that stress, or we don't know how to identify it and act on it, then it leads you right into stage 3, and that's chronic stress. So this is when your stress becomes more persistent. It's overwhelming. You can't manage it at this point. You can't figure out things because you're allowing it to take over your emotions. And honestly, this can start to lead to things like anger, resentment, cynicism. I mean, you could be sitting there and just snap for a moment, or snap at a person that had nothing to do with what you were doing. You just snapped because whatever it was overwhelmed you to the point where anybody and everybody that is in front of you in that moment becomes your target. Now, I have a story about this that I share all the time on some of the other episodes, but and it has a lot more to do with customer service. But I remember when I worked at the grocery store, I got yelled at so many times by some of the angry customers whose orders weren't right, or things weren't on time. They had to wait a long time because there were so many people there. And I remember standing there sometimes and just letting them yell at me. And I would just listen. And I remember the Lord always reminding me that it wasn't me that they were angry at. They were angry at whatever situation they just left. I just happened to be their target. And so when I was able to think that way in my mind and in my heart while they were standing there yelling at me, patience would set in, and I would just allow them to get out whatever they needed to, because wherever they just came from, had really upset them to the point where now they're mad because something's wrong with their groceries. And it never failed. Every time they got done yelling, I would just look at them and very calmly say, well, I apologize for that. We're going to do whatever we can to make sure that we get this right. So if you just be patient with me, I'm going to go take care of your order and I'll be right back. And when I would walk away, they were still angry. But when I came back with whatever problem it was that we needed to solve, they always apologized. They always made a point to say, I'm so sorry for yelling at you. I didn't mean to go off on you. I've had a really hard day. I had a bad day at work. I'm tired. I didn't even feel like coming here. I didn't want to pick up these groceries, and so life just hit them. And I had to remember that I was not the problem. I was part of their current problem, but I was not the reason why they were initially upset. And so if I would just show a little bit of grace and a little bit of love and patience, then I could bring them back to a place of understanding that I didn't have anything against them. I wasn't trying to mess up their order. In fact, I hadn't even picked their order, but I was bringing it to them, and I happened to be their target. That they would stop for a moment and reflect on what just happened, and they would then learn something that day about what it is that was really going on in their own life, how stress had led them to the point where they're just yelling at anybody and everybody, and it wasn't necessary. And so we get into this place of that chronic stress where now we're beyond management. We're trying to control these things and we can't because it has overwhelmed us. So this is where we lead into that burnout phase. So stage 4, believe it or not, is burnout. And there's one that's even worse after that. But burnout is, this is like a huge emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion. And I mean profound. Like, it's noticeable. Other people can feel it. They just know that there's something that's not right. And so really at this point, this is where a lot of people set into that sense of failure. They feel like they've just messed up. They can't get back on track. They're in a pit. They're in a hole. They have failed. This is that point of getting ready to fall into a deeper hole. And if you don't pull yourself up out of that, you're going to get so far down that it's going to be hard. It is possible, but it's going to be hard. So from that point, we lead into the last and final stage, which is habitual burnout. We all know what a habit is. It's constant. It's ongoing. It's something that we learn and that we adapt to. And when it becomes a habit, it's hard to break. So this is where your burnout is unaddressed. You fall into this persistent state of, that mental and physical and emotional exhaustion. And this is where a lot of people find themselves in a dark place of depression or struggling with anxiety. And that's a very bad place to be. And sadly, a lot of people find themselves there, but it wasn't necessary. It didn't need to happen. But we just find ourselves there. And so at this point, it's how do we get back out? Well, the answer is you can get back out. It may take some time, but you will get back out. We just need to pull up out of this phase of burnout and begin to realize what is more important in our life than all of this other stuff that is causing us stress. All right, at this point, I know we're talking a lot about physical, mental, and emotional stress. I want to kind of list some of those symptoms, and this is just because these are the outward signs. The outward stuff that we can physically feel and see, and we know something is off. And they're very, very basic. It's things that you could experience every day, things that, might trigger you to think, oh my goodness, what's wrong? I don't feel well. Or it might be something that is so consistent that you're just used to it. And that's where we don't want to get. We don't want to get to a place where we're just used to it. We just learn to deal with it. We want to be able to identify it and know that, okay, wait, this is not normal. This is not how I usually, am. I want you to think back to, and I'm kind of getting off here because we're going to touch on this one too, but I want to use this one because it's very common. But headaches. Think back to a time when, you had one of your first headaches and you were like, wow, what's wrong with me? What is this? Why does my head hurt so bad? I don't understand it. And you're trying to figure out all the things that could have triggered this. Am I dehydrated? Do I need to take some aspirin? Is it because I didn't eat? Is it because I was out in the heat? Maybe I shouldn't have gone walking on that day. Was the weather off? Was there, allergens in the air? Whatever it was, we're trying to figure it out, right? But then there comes this point where it's like people get to a place where they're just dealing with it. Oh, I get these headaches all the time. Oh, I just need to take some more aspirin. Oh, I need to go lay down. I can't function today because I'm having a really bad headache. We're learning to just deal with it instead of finding the root problem of it and hopefully removing it from our day to day. All right, so let's go down this list just really quickly so that you can have an idea of some of the things that are easily identifiable. We've touched on exhaustion and fatigue. It's just that constant feeling of being tired, even after you've rested. Think about that. Even after you've laid down and taken a nap, or maybe you did get a good night's sleep and you wake up and you're still exhausted. You're still tired. You're still... you feel like you go back and sleep for another several hours. When you got a good amount of rest, something is not right. You're still stressed. Maybe you didn't truly rest. Maybe there were so many things that were going on in your mind before you fell asleep that your body truly did not rest. You still have these thoughts. You still have this stress from work. You still have stress from home, from, wherever it's coming from. You have this overwhelm. You have this concern. You have this worry. You're dealing with this anxiety. And so your body's not resting. So you're constantly physically exhausted. Another one is muscle aches and pain. This could be just muscle soreness in your body. You start to feel these things and you're thinking, well, I didn't go running. I didn't go walking. I didn't do any heavy labor today. I didn't bend over the wrong way. I wasn't squatting. So why are my hips hurting? How come my calves are sore? My arms hurt. These are those muscle aches and pains that you can't explain. Like you don't know where they came from. So, and it doesn't matter how hard you think about it. You just don't know where they came from. So we talked about headaches, gastrointestinal problems, stomach issues, stomach aches, diarrhea, constipation, digestive issues. It's not just what you ate. So if you're having these constant issues where you're just feeling so sick in your stomach and you're constantly running to the bathroom or your food is, you're not keeping your food down. There's this worry and this concern that is happening mentally and emotionally that is causing this physical distress in your stomach area. And if you can't explain it, again, it's something, I can sit there all the time and say, what did I just eat? Did I eat something that's making my stomach sick? Is it food poisoning? Did I eat somewhere different today? Was I not supposed to have something? And I can go down the line of all the food that I ate. And then I'm thinking, no, all of that is normal stuff. I always eat that stuff. So it shouldn't be bothering me. That is a red flag. Sleep disturbances. So you're having difficulty falling asleep or you're staying asleep. So at both ends of the spectrum, right? Or maybe you're experiencing some type of restless sleep. You can't quite get there. And so you're not really resting at all. A weakened immune system. So your immune responses, you're finding that you're getting sick a lot easier when you didn't hardly ever get sick. And so now your immune system is failing you or is weakening. Changes in appetite. Maybe you're sitting there and you're just not hungry. That is another sign of anxiety. We get we sit there and we think, I can't eat. I can't eat. I just don't feel right. My stomach feels off. We're worried or anxious about something. Dizziness and fainting, breathing issues. I mean, these are all outward signs, once again, that we may experience that leads us to, okay, wait a minute, something is not right. So this leads into the next part. We need to start thinking about what are we to do when we're burnt out at work? What are some of the things that we can do to change that situation? Maybe we're not going to leave our job. Maybe, we don't think it's that bad. We actually enjoy what we do, but something is, just really breaking us down. What can we do to change that? So some of the things that you really need to consider, first of all, you need to prioritize yourself. You have a job, yes. You have duties, daily duties, yes. You have leadership that is expecting certain things of you to be done. That's what they pay you for. But you are more important, because if you are not in a good place, then what good are you to them? And so this is where it becomes very important that we recognize that leadership, management, whoever it is that is over you, cannot lead you to a place of burnout, or they're not going to have you there to complete the tasks that are needed at the greatest ability that you can, because you're burnt out. And so if you begin to set these boundaries and really prioritize yourself, then you're able to recognize these things and push back just slightly when you need to, in the moments where you begin to feel stressed and you say, wait a minute, we're not going here. We're not even going to enter that zone. And so we need to have a conversation. We need to talk about this. So prioritizing your self-care, make sure that you're getting enough sleep. I will tell you a good thing to aim for, they always say, is 7 to 9 hours. My threshold is 6. I need to have at least 6 hours and counting. Anything 6 hours and up. If I look at, the hour that I'm going to bed and I notice, okay, I'm only going to get 5.5 hours of sleep tonight, that is a no-no. I should have planned better. I should have gotten the bed better. I should have shut things down, because now I have jeopardized my rest that is important to me, and that was my fault. And so if I know I'm getting in that bed and I have at least 6 hours or more, then I know I'm going to get a good night's sleep, because I can fall asleep and stay asleep. It's not an issue for me, but it's getting enough sleep. One of the other things is exercising, just making sure that you're moving. I sit at a desk all day right now, but I absolutely love when they need us to get up and walk around and go help out, or go organize something, or pack some boxes, or whatever it is. If I can get up and move around, I'm in heaven. Now, I'll go sit down at my desk, I'll get my work done, but getting up and moving is so much more important to me. I start to feel sleepy, I get up, I go take a walk around the building, inside the building, go grab a couple of things, and I come right back. It is very important that we prioritize that in our life. And then another very important one is to really seek support from your fellow coworkers, your friends, your family. And I will say this too. As much as you need to understand that it's important to seek support and encouragement from others, in those moments where you're feeling, overwhelmed, I want to say this to everyone who may not be experiencing burnout. It is so important for you to step in and to be that support and be that encouragement. Be that ray of sunshine to your coworkers that you see are tired, that you see are on that threshold of burnout. Be the ones that are going to, if the leadership is not stepping up and speaking positive to them and telling them what a great job they're doing, or pushing them on to do better and to be better, you be that person. You don't have to have a title. You don't have to have a badge on you that says that you are a supervisor, manager, leader, business owner. You don't have to have a leadership title to be able to step in and be leadership to them. Show them what it is to be a good leader by loving on them, encouraging them, and giving them some hope. Sometimes that's all we need. I see a coworker is tired and exhausted, and I see they're struggling, I am quick to stop what I'm doing and to look at them and say, hey, how are you doing today? Or how was your night? Or did you have a good lunch today? And start that conversation. Get them rolling so that they can perk back up. They can focus. They can kind of take that little short break and shift away from what they're doing that was overwhelming them. Have a encouraging and just lighthearted, sweet conversation. Make them laugh. Tell a joke. Act silly. And then they can get right back into their work. And that workflow becomes maybe not the easiest that it needs to be, but it becomes a little bit easier for them. And then the last thing is to really consider discussing these things with your supervisors and your managers. Don't sit there in silence. They're not always going to like what you have to say. They may not always agree, but that doesn't mean that you can't speak up. And I guarantee you, the more you begin to speak up, the more they either have to choose to listen because they want to, or they'll show you very quickly that they don't want to. And that right there could actually be a blessing in disguise, to know that, okay, wait a minute. If I'm not going to get the support that I feel I need in this job, then it may be time for me to start looking elsewhere. We don't want to have to come to that place. But if you don't feel like you're being fed, and I'll say this because we've heard this for a lifetime, being in ministry and in different ministries, different churches. We always tell people, if you're in a church and you don't feel like you're being fed by the word that's being preached, then maybe that's not the church that God wanted you to be in. Same thing goes for jobs and positions. If you're not being fed, if you're not growing, if you're not experiencing, a place of learning something that's going to propel you to the next thing, then maybe you're not in the right place. Maybe you're supposed to be rooted in another garden. So let's go ahead and round this out, because I can go on and on all day about that. But we've hit that 1 hour mark, and I'm never going to apologize for going long, but I do want to make sure that we hit every point so that, we're actually helping one another through this. And so here's the question. So what is the solution? How do we fix this burnout culture? And this goes for leaders and employees. So what are some of the things that we can do to fix burnout culture? I'm going to go ahead and break it down for you just a little bit here. I'm going to talk to the leaders first. One of the main things is you have to acknowledge the problem. You have to stop ignoring the exhaustion and really start listening to your people. And here's the truth. You're probably exhausted too. And that's not okay. Because one exhausted person leading a whole team of other exhausted people, and they all don't know how to manage it, there's going to be some lashing out, and there's going to be some frustration and some irritation and agitation, all the tations. It's just going to happen. And so you have to be willing to acknowledge the problem. Again, the problem is not just you. It's not just the employee. It is a problem all the way around. It's a problem with the culture. It is a burnout culture, and you have to be willing to fix that. Stop rewarding overwork. We talked about this in the second episode, or the second part. So begin to shift your focus from hours worked to the efficiency and the well-being of your people. Don't reward them just for that overwork, that overtime. Their time, when they clock out of that daily task, that is their time. And so it's more important to look at the efficiency of what they're getting done rather than the amount of time that they're putting into it. I've known people that can, I was getting ready to jump into the next one, but I just have to say that I've known people that can knock their work out so quickly and do it so efficiently. Why? Because their heart was in it, their focus was on it, and they knew it was important. So they did it to the best of their ability, and they did it right. There may have been some questions in between there, or some minor mistakes that needed to be fixed, or something they needed to go back and review. But the efficiency of it and the time that it was done in is just at a level of thinking about it this way. Someone who would get something done in the 8 hours of the day, another person got it done in 5, and it was done even greater. These are the type of people that I've had the privilege to work with. Encourage real rest. Start to normalize vacations. Prioritize lunch breaks, time off. Remind your employees that these things are important. Don't work through your lunch. I'm guilty of that sometimes, but just because I may be trying to finish something, but it's not all the time. I get to work at 7:30 in the morning. I used to get to work and start working immediately every day. And my work day doesn't start till 8, but because I'm an early riser and I like to be there, and I like to be not just on time, but early. I like to get settled. I like to have that little bit of time to myself. I jump in there and I start getting tasks done. And it wasn't until lately that I started to walk in there at 7:30, put my bags down, go put my lunch up, grab my breakfast, and I actually sit there and I eat my breakfast and I enjoy it. And I might check my email, and right at about 5 minutes till, I'll start logging into all my stuff and start setting up for the day. And I found that was more of a priority to me, to take that time for myself so that I can prepare my mind and my heart and my spirit for what I'm about to get into for the day. Other people say it's just a job, but to me, it was very important for me to have that time to prep instead of rushing in and having to throw my stuff down and get right into the job. So different things work for different people, but that's just really stopping and saying, okay, wait, this is actually my time and I'm going to take it. Fix your workload. What's the best way to say this? Like the distribution of the workload. Stop expecting one person to do the job of 3. And just really begin to recognize that, okay, wait, we need to shift these things. We need to divvy this work out. We need to balance it, because I'm not going to overwork one person to make sure that all this stuff is done when it's really the job of multiple people, or this is something that I can split among multiple people. And then lead by example. So if you want your team to unplug, then you need to do it too. That's the easiest way to say that. So for the employees, number 1, you need to learn to set boundaries. Protect your time and your energy. Say no when you have to. And I'm going to go back to what I shared with you last week. Episode 40. If you can, go back and listen to it. Episode 40 is how to set healthy boundaries in your everyday and work life. So I would encourage you to go back and listen to that one. But you have to learn to set boundaries. Stop glorifying burnout. So it's not a place for us to start to flex. That's one of those, terms that I don't even know what you call it, but we're not going to flex on each other. Being exhausted isn't an opportunity for us to flex. Hey, look at what I did. Look at what I'm doing. I'm working hard. I'm here all the time. I get up. I'm at the office at this time, and I don't leave till this time. That's not a flex moment. It's a warning sign, because that burnout is coming. Speak up. If you feel like you're drowning, don't. And I've said this multiple times on here. Don't suffer in silence. Talk to somebody. Find somebody that you trust that can be an outlet for you. And then know when it's time to walk away. And this one's really hard, but it's so very important. If your leadership refuses to change, and I'm talking about this culture that they've created, these words that they say, these actions that they show, if they refuse to change, then it might be time for you to find a workplace that values you. Find that place that is going to see the value in you and be able to utilize what you have with appreciation. Nobody wants to be in a place where they're not appreciated, where they're not valued. where people can't see how valuable you are with the skills and the knowledge and the wisdom and the experience that you have. That you want them to see that in you. So I'm going to say this and we're going to go ahead and close. But it's time to shift the narrative. Employees should not have to sacrifice their health for their job. Leaders need to recognize that burnout isn't a personal problem. It's really an organizational failure. And so we can't be afraid to speak those truths. It's okay to call that a truth, because it is. It's not just the employee's fault, and it's not just the management and the leadership's fault. I'm going to say that over and over, because your leadership may be suffering just as much as you are. So before we wrap up, I want to leave you with this. If your workplace is filled with exhausted, and I'm talking to the leaders here, if your workplace is filled with exhausted, overworked, disengaged employees, the problem isn't them. It's the culture. And the culture starts at the top. So here's my question and my challenge to the leaders. If you're a leader and you're listening right now, here's my challenge to you. If you walked into your workplace tomorrow and you asked your employees, are you burnt out? Would they feel safe enough to tell you the truth? And if they did, what would you actually do about it? It's a tough question, because sometimes we don't want to hear the truth. But would they feel safe enough to tell you the real truth? And then what would you actually do about it? So I want to keep this conversation going. And I want to invite you to direct message or you can comment under this episode and share your burnout stories, because this is so important. Other people may need to hear your testimony, your story. They may need to hear what it is that you've gone through. They may need to hear what you're going through so that they know that they're not alone. And if you want to share that story on social media, or you want to share it in the comments of this podcast, then I want you to use the hashtag burnout starts at the top, just so we can keep this conversation going. And if this episode really resonated with you, then share it. Share it with someone who needs to hear. And let's change the workplace culture together. This is so important, you guys. So very important. So I want to keep this going. I don't know. I may come back next Friday with a final part 4 to round this out, just so that we can talk a little more openly away from all of these symptoms and just share more on what it means to understand that burnout doesn't need to happen. And to also remember that you may be burned out, but you're not broken. You are not broken. And I shared this earlier. I shared it on the last part as well. But when we think about being broken, brokenness is not a state of hopelessness, but it's a position of purpose. So you may be broken, or you may feel broken. And I know, when we say you could be burned out, but you're not broken, but sometimes we do find ourselves in that place where we feel like we're broken, but you're really not. Because we're not hopeless. Feeling like that and being in that position, it positions us to be able to come to a place of purpose. So remember that as we leave here today, and just know that brokenness is not a state of hopelessness, but a position of purpose. So I want to thank you for tuning into the Expressions of Destiny podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. And until then, God bless.